Hello, world. This is Hello Chaos, the podcast about the ups and downs, ins and outs, highlights, and low points of entrepreneurship. We love it all. I am your co-host, Jennifer Oladipo, a.k.a. Jenno.
And I am your other co-host, Jennifer Sutton, a.k.a. JJ. And in studio, very excited. I always love when we have in studio guests, but we have Sam English with the University of South Carolina, USC. No longer
That's right.
U of SC.
Yes.
We are solid with the
Not to be
USC.
confused with that other school. Absolutely.
We heard there was a big
We
trademark.
We are US.
But yeah, it's now University of South Carolina, USC.
Yes, absolutely.
So welcome, Sam. I appreciate you
so
coming
glad
in.
to have you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So we are excited to talk about ecosystems today. And
What do we mean by ecosystem?
that for starters. What does it mean? Since you work in ecosystem building. But what we're really been trying to talk about and dig into is what does it mean for entrepreneurs and founders? Is that
Sure.
what people even think about themselves as part of an ecosystem?
Right.
So
What is an ecosystem?
yeah. So just start by telling us what you're doing at USC and your ecosystem background.
Sure. So I've got the best gig in the whole world. I get to do fun things. So I kind of have three buckets.
Okay.
I do tech transfer, research, commercialization. So I get to work with faculty that have great ideas, figure out how to get those in the real world. Then I do the ecosystem building, which is that squishy kind of, right? So part of it is, what is ecosystem building? But it's all those support pieces that go around the entrepreneurs, to help them on their journey. And then the last piece is really what I would call tech-based economic development. So helping really looking for economic impact. And it's really from a tech-based, scalable types of companies.
Okay.
So a little bit different slice, if you will, of that ecosystem building.
So tech innovation and
That's right.
high impact entrepreneurs of how are they boosting and supporting the local economy?
That's exactly right.
And really in Columbia, South Carolina, or are you looking at a larger?
Larger than that.
Okay.
It's South Carolina. So I'm from South Carolina. Glad to be back. Came back last year. So still learning my way around.
Okay.
Which is how I found you guys, which is why I love what you guys are doing.
Oh, thank you.
So it's a
Appreciate that.
it's a
Yeah.
great service, and I hope it's a good business as well. So part of it is just trying to figure out what's going on, and then connecting the dots and figuring out where the gaps are. What's working, what's not working, and what needs to be tweaked.
So talk to me about that first bucket of.
Sure.
It's interesting. We talked to another colleague that worked with the McNair Institute at USC,
Which is for students.
Which is for
that's also in
students.
entrepreneurship.
Yes.
but you're working with to uncover faculty ideas.
Sure. Yes.
How does that work?
Sure. So the process is actually fairly straightforward in that faculty essentially raise their hands and say, I've got an invention or I've got an idea, and they file that disclosure with the university. And so they say, this is why I think it's novel. This is why I think it's interesting, and maybe have some commercial potential.
Okay.
Right. So usually very early stage. And so then we help figure out, is it, worth protecting? Right. And one of the things that I'm very proud to say is that the university has been recognized for about a decade now as one of the highest patenting institutions in the world, actually, when it comes to protecting intellectual property.
Okay.
And that's not trivial. That's
that is huge.
As you might imagine, protecting IP is a fairly expensive endeavor.
Yeah.
And so part of it is protecting that innovation, but then also figuring out what does the commercial path look like.
Okay.
So is it licensing out to a company? Is it starting up a company? Are there other parts of the puzzle that can then be pulled together to launch a company?
So does the university cover the IP costs?
That's right.
And
Yes.
that's into perpetuity, right?
Exactly.
So that's the incentive for that faculty member to register that.
That's exactly it. Yep.
Okay.
And of course, the proceeds are shared amongst everyone involved.
Okay.
So all the inventors, as well as the university, share in all of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So there's a true incentive of
Really is.
keep it in house.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Do you find that the academics who are working on whatever, I'm assuming it's across disciplines.
Yes.
Are folks good at identifying when they have something? Let's
sure. Yes, of course, absolutely.
Most regular folks, I don't think are. So you know.
So the let's see, how do I say this? So part of it is, so there are faculty that have been around the block before, and are familiar with intellectual property, and maybe they've been in industry, and so those faculty usually are the ones that kind of sail through the process, right? They know what it is. Other faculty, though, kind of have to help them understand what it is and what it's not, and then how to use it. So the short answer is yes and no. But part of our role, our Office of Innovation Economic Development Partnerships. We do a little bit of everything, which is service to the faculty. Right. At the end of the day, they're the ones that we are there to assist. So we're helping to lift them, their ideas, their innovations, how to get those out in the real world. So that education component is important. So helping them to understand what truly is an innovation, and particularly what the patenting process looks like, because that's a pretty high hurdle actually getting a patent.
Is that where you're cultivating the high impact entrepreneurs, or the potential of that tech economic development? Is that where that's the pool?
In an ideal world, yes, it would hit all three. Part of it, in an ideal world, there's an innovation at the university, because the faculty are literally looking 10 years down the road. Right? I mean, they're way out there, which is great. But then the question is really, how do you take that and then take it the next few steps? How do you validate? How do you then, not only prove out the technology, but develop a business case around it, so that you can either, interest a strategic partner or a company out there and licensing it, or starting up a company.
Right.
Yeah.
Is there a common part of that process, especially from the I have an idea to I think this is a good business idea, where maybe there's like common, I don't know, like a missing piece of information or misconceptions that faculty have when they come to you with these ideas?
Well, so the vetting process, so the lean startup approach of customer discovery, right? So y'all are familiar with that, right? So it's literally the same. The idea is that you've got an idea. You have something that you think is novel. Well, is it really novel?
Right.
Let's go talk to people who are in this space and find out, is this a real need? Is it not a need? And ultimately, is there potential for this to solve their problem? So it's a somewhat similar process. Of course, it's further back upstream at the innovation, and it will iterate a lot, actually. Right. Whereas, you're a little bit further along in a business, you don't quite have that same latitude. But if you're still at the ideation stage, you can tweak it quite a bit.
Is there a way to sort of, is there a shorthand for telling the difference between a good, I'm just going to say science, right? Or a good, idea
like
that
tech.
I was just going to say something that furthers the field versus something that can be a business. Is there some kind of shorthand for determining that, or do you just always have to dig in and see?
You do have to dig in and see. It might not be obvious. So part of it is it a platform type of a technology? Is it something that can then be applied in multiple markets? Right. So that's one test that's, you can figure that one out pretty easily. Is it an enabling technology that can then be, you start in aerospace and then you can apply it in other markets as well, right?
Yeah.
And so then starting a business makes more sense. Whereas if it only applies in one niche in one very specific market, maybe licensing the technology to somebody that's already in that space would be the faster route to commercialization.
And do you guys help with those, I guess, plans, negotiations, and the strategies around like licensing versus developing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we do. Yes.
They're all like soup to nuts.
So it's right. So it's not, we obviously the faculty are very involved in moving it forward, and we kind of support and assist and help.
Yeah. It's not like, it needs to be licensed, and then you hand it over. You're off on your own. Figure that out.
No, not
at
all. No.
Because we've seen that with other, incubators, accelerators. They're just trying to flesh out They're not trying to tell you what to do. They're trying to guide you to uncover that. But at the end of the day, after your accelerator, it's like, all right, see ya.
Yes. No, we take a pretty active role. And that's the way we're structured, is to be able to do that, because it's the university's intellectual property.
Okay.
We have that responsibility. And particularly if there's federal funding. Anyway, I won't get too far into the weeds, but if there's federal funding involved, there's a responsibility. That's right. That's part of our role as the university, as the steward.
Plus, it's a side hustle by definition, if these are faculty, this is just a side hustle. So if it's going to move forward, somebody...
That could be their exit strategy from academia.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely.
That's their way.
Well, and actually that's part of the puzzle. And so, most faculty, not all, but, most of them want to stay at the university.
Yeah. Right.
And so, want to find... Well, if you're going to try and spin up a business around it, well, who's going to really nurture that technology and develop it along? Maybe there's a grad student, maybe there's a postdoc, maybe there's someone that might be ready to jump ship, roll up their sleeves.
Is it unusual within a university to have an office like your setup? Is that why USC has that, top IP globally kind of recognition?
So we have a really wonderful office, which is really what attracted me to the university. So, I have not worked for, I have not received a paycheck, I'll put it that way, in 15 years, right? So I've been running my own businesses and doing my own thing, out in the real world, in the business world. And so for me to join a university, what I was looking for was one that had this holistic approach all the way from tech transfer to engaging industry to really being looking at the bigger picture and being less transactional about it. And USC has that.
Okay.
And that's really what attracted me. But most universities will have an office that will do at least some parts of what we try to do holistically.
Yeah, we've seen where it's an office of innovation, where it's just focused on student entrepreneurship or
just the IP.
Or just the IP, but not, I don't think all three, or especially not even engaged in the ecosystem.
Yeah. Right. So let's get to that. What's an ecosystem? What is it, Sam? We have the expert here.
We need a definition.
Sure.
We don't like the word entrepreneur just because it's a horrible word to write, shorthand.
I misspell it every time.
I know.
Right?
Yes. Thank you.
And we challenge ourselves is there another word? And there's not.
Right.
It's an old word.
Yes.
That has not been innovative.
14th century.
But ecosystem.
Yeah. So the way I think about it is that it's really all those supporting pieces that are around the founder. Right. I'll shift from entrepreneur to founder.
Yeah. Okay. We like that shift. That's nice.
And so it's all those supporting pieces, all the way from the information that they need, the training, the education, the resources, just on the pure information side, the places that they hang out, the places that they need to grow to nurture their business, and then obviously the capital to actually fuel it and help make it grow.
Right.
So it's, all of those components, and those, come from whole variety, as you guys know, a whole variety of sources. And there's different roles in the ecosystem.
Yeah. It's very hard for a founder to navigate.
Oh, it's
extremely, as a founder, it is very hard to navigate.
Yes. And to be honest with you, part of it is, in fact, most entrepreneur support organizations, I think they probably spend most of their time thinking about wayfinding, how to help the entrepreneurs get directed and connected. In my experience, it still really comes down to people. It's kind of that, one-to-one biz dev kind of introduction relationship. Let me introduce you to the person at McNair that does, right? And so there's a lot of that. And then the question is, how can we scale that?
Yeah.
And so how do we institutionalize and make it easier for the entrepreneur?
So what makes up, there's a bunch of organizations, but what creates a strong ecosystem? Like, what's the ideal ecosystem look like? Is there an ideal out there?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. I hesitate to hold up anyone as an ideal because each ecosystem is just so different. And that sounds like a cop-out. Maybe it is.
No.
Every region is so different. And when I think about South Carolina, I think about our big three areas, metro areas, right?
That's Greenville, Columbia, Charleston.
And Charleston,
okay.
Right. And so I think of those as really kind of the entrepreneurial hubs, because the biggest component of an ecosystem is that density. And so you really have to have that, because otherwise it becomes really difficult to have a network that's supporting the entrepreneurs at a distance. It's just not as efficient. It's
right.
Yeah.
Right.
And so, then the question is, do the people in the community know that there are different roles for them to play?
Yeah.
How do they plug in?
Yeah.
How do they engage? And, ultimately, how can they help the entrepreneurs?
Right.
It's kind of like the you get together once every few weeks and the entrepreneur stands up and says, here's what I'm working on.
Yeah.
And the community says, hey, great. My brother-in-law has a whatever, or, right. It can be as simple as that.
Right.
It doesn't have to be complicated. We like to make it complicated.
I was about to say, but it is though.
We make it complicated.
Do you? So it's kind of. So you're saying, it's it's reflective of, and I guess responsive to whatever the community is. But if you've worked in different settings, and is there anything you find that does really make a difference in terms of a place really being a place where entrepreneurs can thrive?
The wayfinding is a big piece of it.
Okay.
But I would say probably another important component is the trusted relationships that are there, that are in the community around the entrepreneur. And the entrepreneur may never be aware of these things that are there, right? So it's, knowing the folks at the Chamber of Commerce, knowing the banks and, which banks do what types of lending.
Right.
Or knowing, which attorneys, or, heaven forbid, you actually get into, those situations where you need the right type of legal counsel.
Yeah.
Right. So, part of it is those trusted networks that are around, and most entrepreneurs, fortunately, they can focus on their business, so they don't have to go out and vet all of these individual service providers.
Right.
And so, so it's probably a combination of that as well. A lot of trusted relationships.
Yeah. Well, and what we've noticed as a gap, and I'd love to get your take on this, is as we kind of looked at not just the South Carolina market, but, across the U.S. of these different ecosystems, one of the challenges is getting enough information to the founder entrepreneur to know enough about some of these organizations to ask the right questions, feel comfortable that that's a trusted and safe, place to share, open their books or have those vulnerable. And it, like I said, we hear over and over and again is my local community or my local, they don't even use the word ecosystem. I think that's our term, right?
It is.
It's not a founder entrepreneur-led term. But they're like, I don't know. There's 40 of these organizations, or in bigger markets, there's 200. Where do I go for this? Where do I go for this? How do I know, how do I get enough information to be able to feel comfortable to make that connection? That's the gap that Orange Whip is trying to fill. But I'm just curious is that's what we keep hearing, but is that, you're an ecosystem builder kind of expert. Is that...
Yeah, what are the big things that people have trouble finding that they need?
Yeah. So part of it is defining the swim lane. So you said something that's very important is that, there are a lot of organizations that help entrepreneurs, but it's a matter of aligning, what it is that the entrepreneurs need.
Right.
And they need it at the right time.
Yeah. Right.
Because it's for entrepreneurs, it's all about efficiency.
Right.
They're only going to pull their head up so many times.
That's right.
And if it doesn't work out, they'll put their head back down and you'll never see them again.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so
I like the swim lanes.
Yeah.
And so part of it is just knowing, and that's why I say it gets back to those trusted relationships. So that if I make a referral to the SBDC, right, I won't call any names, but if I make a referral I'll make up Joe Bob.
Yep.
The Joe Bob at the SBDC, we know, and I know what he does well, and I know what the SBDC does well.
Right.
Or if I, suggesting somebody go see someone over at Next, or anyway, I'll generically pick on organizations.
Billy Bob.
Billy Bob over at Next. I know where they're coming from, and I know how they can help that entrepreneur.
Right.
But part of it is having a read on the entrepreneur on the front end, and that's not easy.
Yeah.
To unpack it and really get to where, because most entrepreneurs, maybe all, is that self-awareness is a challenge.
Yeah.
Really knowing what it is they need versus what they think they need. Right.
The theme of the day.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Everybody needs capital.
Right.
Well, no, not really. You just need capital in order to solve other problems.
Right.
What are the fundamental problems that you need solved?
Yeah.
And so being able to assess on the front end, unpack that, and then identify what resources can then be plugged in. And that's why an ESO support organization is wonderful, because that's what they do.
Right. So as you're kind of navigating that, are you becoming that? Are you the coach?
So I'm still learning my way around.
Okay.
And so, I'm learning, bits and pieces of, where folks are, and particularly, part of what I'm trying to get a better handle on, and which is why what you guys are doing is so important, is across the state.
Mm-hmm.
So part of it is that local ecosystem building, but then there are resources, there's talent, there's, if there's an entrepreneur maybe in Greenville who's building a business that's selling widgets, as it turns out, somebody down in Charleston had a business that was very similar to that and exited. Grew it and then exited. It would be wonderful to be able to connect them.
Yeah.
So part of it is, figuring out where are those pockets.
Whoa, that's a big endeavor.
Yeah, well, but I think we talked about this on our call several weeks ago, Sam. But you see that some founders themselves are looking at things in that way. So you go to an event in Columbia and you go to an event in Charleston, and you're seeing some of the same people, and you see them in Greenville, and so they're looking for those answers wherever they think they can find them.
Right.
Yes.
And it's not just what's right in front of me. Okay. I guess there's some who will go anywhere, and some who are like, I need it to be right in front of me.
Right. Or they're literally Googling it to go.
Yeah, where on earth is it?
Yes.
They're going.
Right.
They're joining an accelerator, an incubator in Boston or Atlanta or San Diego.
And part of it is recognizing what resources we have and what we don't have. Right. So if you've got a med device and you are thinking about an accelerator program up in Boston, that's phenomenal.
Right.
Because that's probably a pretty good fit for you.
Right.
Because of the stage of development of that ecosystem. But that's not to say that, we can't grow those resources and knit those together here.
Yeah.
Or if you find that somebody is just a, app developer company that's doing a Boston accelerator, you might go, whoa.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Why didn't you use the accelerators that are literally in your back door?
Yes.
And trying to educate those founders that there are resources here.
Well, and that gets back to that trusted component, knowing. Yeah, and part of the challenge is that all organizations is just inherent. There's an outward-facing component. There's their aspirational goals, what they want to be, who they want to serve, how they want to serve them, and then there's their true, their sweet spot, if you will, of where they really add the most value, their highest and best use. Right?
Yeah.
And so part of it is being able to understand what that core is, and then how that can then be applied to the entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. That's sounds like a need for self-awareness on the parts of those folks who want to serve founders. Do you find that organizations try to do too much or don't know what they're best at? Where does that, just observationally?
So the good part is that in general, the organizations, at least that I've run into so far, are pretty self-aware. And they're not competing for resources, right? So part of it really comes down to the competition and having an abundance mindset as opposed to scarcity. So if organizations are competing or believe they're competing for the same dollars in particular, right? I'll pick on economic development organizations, right? So supporting this organization or supporting this, and unfortunately, in some cases, that funder may not appreciate the difference between the organizations and who they serve and how they serve.
Oh, yeah.
Right, and the roles.
Yeah.
But the organizations know the difference. And what I found is that, they're aware enough to be able to say, yes, and, right? So it's not one or the other. It's both, because we're serving different audiences. We do it differently. And here's how collectively we can really impact the broader ecosystem.
Okay.
So they at least so far, they play nice together, which is wonderful.
Yeah.
Good. So what can founders do to figure out, okay, this is who I am, this is what my business is, and how
to tap into the ecosystem?
Yeah, and how to know who is a good fit for me, because you don't have time necessarily to sit down with every economic, maybe not understand what's the difference between the local chamber and the local, pick your, development corridor, whatever, you know what I mean? And not knowing what when founders are sitting down thinking, okay, I need help, how can they think about themselves to figure out where to go?
Yeah. Okay. Part of it is that, so they really have to spend some time understanding where they are on their journey, right? As a founder, and I think we may have talked a little bit about this earlier. So as a founder, the question is, how do you map into this? What do you want? Business is a tool. The question is, what do you want, and how can this work for you?
Okay.
And then you can build the other components around it to make it work, because obviously, you don't want to get people on your ship, if you will, if you're not aligned.
Right.
And so part of it is knowing your strengths, your core. And so it's really incumbent upon that founder to understand what they're bringing to the party, and where their strengths are and what their interests are. I'll give you a great example. I mean, the first company I did, there were 3 of us. We had absolutely no idea. We were faculty at the time. And we just started building a product. We went down to my buddy's basement and started doing the coding, and we built a product.
Right.
But our intention was not really to start a company. And so, lo and behold, before we knew it, we had something that was moving and growing, and but we weren't aligned at all. And so, right.
The 3 of you as a team.
Not at all. Absolutely not. And, and so that, that unraveled, as you might imagine. As you might imagine. Yeah, go figure. Yeah. So that self-awareness is really the foundational piece for the founder. And then it branches out from there to the rest of the founding team and how they fit in. So my general advice is understanding where they are on their journey. Are they looking to solve a single problem that they've encountered, right? Do they have that personal experience?
Right.
Right. Were they in the educational system and see a better way of doing X, Y, Z?
Right.
And knowing what that would then be. And then obviously figuring out, what else do they need to have in order to build a product, in order to build a solution. And of course, doing that customer discovery along the way. I'll come back to that.
Yeah.
That's the important part.
Yeah.
Yes. So.
Excellent. Actually, let's just get into that now, because I think that is the biggest failing point for a lot of folks. And where having someone like you to help, it's like, okay, I've got this great idea. I know somebody's going to want it, and people are telling you it's cool, but will they buy it actually?
Right.
So can you talk a little bit about how you guide people, what you advise when it comes to customer discovery?
Sure. So my best advice, is to find a formal program that will put you through that.
Like an incubator, accelerator. Okay.
So most accelerator, I'll use the terminology of accelerator as in a formal educational program that may or may not have space, but usually has a defined cohort. Right. So you're starting as a cohort and you're running over
with some kind of guidance and curriculum.
There's a boot camp. Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
Okay.
So for those, there's usually for virtually all of them are going to have some sort of a customer discovery. Is there a real need? Is there a real, solution that needs to be improved upon? And so I would say do that in a formal way, because somebody's got to hold you accountable, which gets back to, who is around the entrepreneur as they become a founder or wanting to become a founder, right?
And asking all those critical questions and really getting them to think critically about, is this just this lofty thing that I think is cool,
right?
But, nobody wants it.
Exactly.
There's not a market for that.
That's right. And that's where,
or maybe it's not the market you thought.
Yeah.
No. And pivot now. So make the adjustments.
Right.
Yeah.
You can do that early because, so do these things before you build, before you actually, launch the company.
Right.
Actually find out, is there a real need? Is there a real solution? And can you deliver it? And ultimately, will they pay for it?
Right.
And then, if you do it the right way, you actually come along and you've got customers or folks that you interviewed that could then be part of your customer base. And I was actually just watching a thing back in Virginia. They were providing their year-end update. Anyway, they had a team come through, and 100 is usually the litmus test, right? So 100 customer discovery interviews, right?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Right. That's kind of the, every week you come in, you report on, what hypothesis did you test? Anyway, so there's a formal process to that. Anyway, this one team had done, about 150 interviews. And in that, along the way, they made a lot of adjustments, but they then signed 3, as a result of that, they then signed agreements to provide services with 3 strategic partners
out of that discovery process.
Customers, because they had made, evidently, gone out to the investment community and pitched and didn't get a positive response. But then when they came back to the same investment committee, investment folks, and said, hey, we now have partners.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
People will invest.
Yeah.
So can you just like unpack that a little bit?
Sure.
Like, how are people gathering the information? Is it like just qualitative interviews and you get a gist of things, or do you recommend people actually do qualitative and quantitative, break it down, and then like who should look at it, when you're going through all those many interviews?
It is qualitative. And so in my experience with what I would call more formal survey types of things. In fact, I'll give you a real example. I did a survey once. This was back when I was doing my own customer discovery. 93% of the people that I surveyed, these were clinical psychologists, indicated that they would use the product, right, as it was described to them. Now, what was not embedded in all of that was those minor details of how much would they pay for
the
it?
pricing, elasticity.
Those minor things of, how easy would it be to use, et cetera, right?
Yeah.
So these are all, face-to-face, tell me about your day. Tell me about, how you're doing. I'll pick on, the clinical diagnoses, right? Sure. So if you have a child come into your practice, how do you talk about with the parent? How do you find out about their ADHD symptoms or whatever the diagnosis is? And then ultimately, how do you make that formal diagnosis? And are there ways that it could happen better for you?
Right.
What are the challenges that you're running into? And so it's an awful lot of listening. And so just, listening for those cues. And, you get, 5 people who are saying something similar, that they're running into a similar issue.
Right.
Then maybe that's something worth considering.
Okay.
And so then you tee it up as a formal question for the next round that you go to.
Yeah.
So, that's kind of
the purpose of research design. Right?
It is. Test the hypothesis.
Yeah.
That's right.
It really is. So.
But that's interesting to note that, your questions are going to change. So it's not get out there and ask 100 people the same questions.
Right.
It's let your findings guide your search as you go on.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. And that's part of that formal educational program. So the I-Corps, are you familiar with I-Corps? So I-Corps is an NSF-specific program.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
The National Science Foundation.
Okay.
Yes, exactly. And so it's really for mostly, university faculty, technologies coming out of the universities about validating that, is there really a market need? What would it need to, how would it need to function in order to actually solve a problem? And so anyway, but that process of customer discovery is exactly the same as if you're, wanting to know about setting up a retail shop on Main Street.
Right.
You still need to understand your customer. You say, okay, great. This is why my product is why I believe my product is superior. And I think that somebody would pay for it.
Right.
Yeah. Same
Excellent.
process.
Yeah.
So for those who don't have lovely, access to a wraparound, resource like you just right at hand and, want to go about testing their ideas.
Yeah.
And maybe they're all in already, or maybe it's still a side hustle. Just what is a kind of really sort of first step questions to start asking, or a first way to get going on that process?
Yeah. So my first contact would be with the support organization that's closest to you. So, all three, well, in fact, a lot more. I would not even begin to count because my number would be wrong. There's a lot of entrepreneur support organizations literally across South Carolina.
Yeah.
And so having that initial conversation with somebody there is the best way.
So just somebody in town, you're saying?
Somebody in town.
Right.
Yeah.
So whether it's an SBDC, Small Business Development Council is in almost every market.
Yes.
Or SCORE.
Right. Exactly.
The chamber.
Yes.
Yes,
exactly.
Or a university that has an accelerator or an incubator program.
Yes.
Right?
A lot of universities do have innovation programs. And so, certainly the folks at those centers, know what resources are around and can usually help guide you. There's also a lot of online tools. So there's, there are resource directories. They're only as good as the information that's going into them.
That's right.
They're difficult to
maintain. We built them and they are hard.
That's
they're
right.
hard, yeah.
But they can be helpful. At least give you a starting point for what you're looking for. So those are probably the easiest thing. Find somebody.
Yeah. Basically just start engaging into that there is an ecosystem that will surround you and support you. And to just be knowledgeable of that, because I don't think that is a known factor that the community wants to support entrepreneurs and founders.
Yes.
So there are organizations that will, umbrella you.
That's one of the things that I've always found to be the coolest is the people who are at, say, like a demo day or a founder
Lemonade
summit or something
day.
like that. Yeah. And it's just like, I just want to know what was going on. They don't have a business. They're not planning to start one. They don't really know, folks there, but they just like the energy and they want to be a part of it and see, how they can plug in.
And if there's founders and small business owners that are interested, they just need to go to something and engage.
Yeah. Go to something.
That's right. And there are a lot of events. Right?
Yeah, there are.
And nowadays they're online as well.
Right.
Yep.
So, you can engage at a distance.
That's right.
So pre-pandemic, it was very different. So it was a very, very, literally.
Very in-face.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it had to be in person, whereas
That's
now.
in-face.
It's in your face.
Face to face. Sorry.
Entrepreneurship was so in your face before COVID.
Maybe not a South Carolina
Yeah.
thing. All right.
That's right. You're like, what was that? No.
But
in person. Yeah.
But now, right? So now the at a distance is a lot easier.
Yeah, we've seen that kind of trend up of those virtual.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm in those
meetups
things. I have that stuff all the time.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's played in the background or
the audio lives on
Yeah.
LinkedIn. We've been part of some of those, and
Well, cool. Well, Sam, thank you so much. This has been
sure.
awesome.
Absolutely.
I feel like ecosystem is a good word. I feel like we can get behind that one.
Yeah, I think so. I like it.
It's got meaning. It makes sense.
Well, and it's community, but I feel like it has an organic sense to it.
Yeah.
Well, and you bring up a really important point is that we need to make sure that we don't lose focus around the entrepreneur, the founder.
That's right.
And the term ecosystem, implies that, that there really is, there's some intentionality that everything be organized in a way around that.
Right.
And so I for that, I think it is a good term.
Yeah, I like, and that's why I said sometimes when we formed Orange Whip really to help be that connective tissue, because we noticed a lot of the ESOs, those ecosystem support organizations, don't necessarily have the founder and entrepreneur in their center. They're serving in another agenda, and so we kind of wanted to play that role of we have that dedicated voice, that megaphone, that perspective of the entrepreneur and founder. That's kind of our why.
That's it.
And I'm, this just helps validate as we're continuously testing our hypothesis.
Our little startup.
Our startup of, sometimes you question it to go, is our why important? And with every conversation, it continues to get validated.
We kind of get free interviews, our 100 interviews. Just talking to founders all the time. Yeah,
that's right. Well, thank you. This was fantastic.
Folks want to connect or learn more about what you're doing. Where are the best places to find you?
How do they find you?
Just find it. Email's probably the easiest. SamEnglish at sc.edu.
sc.edu. Okay.
So simple. I'm so jealous. Yeah. I've never had an email that was that simple.
And what about the organization? Like the
sure. So go to the USC website, which is sc.edu.
Okay.
And look for. Just type in economic engagement. That's probably the easiest way to find our office. That's
Very
what
good.
most folks call it, as opposed to the alphabet.
Office of
innovation.
Economic engagement. That's what we're all talking about, really. At the end of the day.
Exactly.
And where can folks find us, Jennifer?
Our podcast is available on all podcast platforms. Your favorite, iTunes or Spotify.
YouTubes.
Or the easiest is to go to orangewhip.com. That's orangewip.com. Look for the Hello Chaos page, and you can see the video, listen to the audio, share, like, comment, and then also peruse our online media platform.
Digital magazines,
that are, again, in Greenville, Charleston, and Columbia.
Yep.
That has a resource directory with the swim lanes.
That's right. Nice. That's right. We figured we tried to help say, spend a little less time figuring out what this is and if it's for you. And
we'll help you with
those
that.
Digital platforms.
And then an aggregate events calendar. So it's a one-stop place if you're a founder and entrepreneur.
Well, thank you, Sam. This has been great. Really appreciate the conversation.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.